FishOnAStick's Bad Weapon Rehabilitation is a mod for TF2 servers designed to try and make the game more balanced. Today I'll be going over the changes made to Pyro and ask, is it actually more balanced? Now buckle up, because I think Pyro has more changes made to him than any other class. Because of course he does. Pyro is one of the unique classes in this mod because not only are his weapons changed, but many of his base attributes are changed as well. Now Pyro has had a completely broken mechanic attached to his flamethrower for quite a while. No, I don't mean that, and I don't mean that kind of broken. You see, Pyro's flamethrower is supposed to reward you consistently hitting flame particles with you getting more damage. It doesn't work. For a myriad of different reasons, including using oldest flame particle to calculate distance instead of, distance. The fact that missing a single flame particle, many of which go in random directions, resets this completely. And of course, good old lag. What this mechanic actually amounts to is giving Pyro a completely random arbitrary amount of damage for every individual engagement he enters. For more information on this, please watch Meet the Broken Flamethrower. It should be required reading for any Pyro main or person seriously interested in balance. This mod is successfully able to fix this. Oh, thank God. Now instead of resetting because of one random flame particle not hitting your enemy, it resets after 0.5 seconds of not contacting any flame. Personally, I think this could be lowered all the way down to 0.2 seconds and it'd be fine, but I'd say the change is good. This does make Pyro a lot better at dealing consistent damage, but I wouldn't necessarily call it a buff, because it's just fixing a mechanic that never worked in the first place. The next two changes are experimental. These are changes that are purposefully very wild and different from the base game of TF2 that could be the most broken thing ever, or they could not matter at all. The first experimental change is flames linger on surfaces for 3 seconds, dealing minor damage and igniting enemies. Yeah, this is very much on the not matter side of things. Basically, you can set up your own little mini pyro traps that can help get players off of you. Now this can be useful, but it is really edge case. The issue is because of the flamethrower's lack of range, these traps are only really useful in tight corridors and around corners, but that's also the range where Pyro is the best, so why wouldn't I just kill them? If the damage was increased just a little bit, or the duration was increased to longer than 3 seconds, I could however see this being a really useful and engaging tool to use. The second experimental change is Air Blast provides knockback to self while airborne. I don't know why the text looks like that, don't worry about it. Basically, this works as a much weaker rocket jump, or an incredibly terrible double jump if you really want it to. This is a really big change. It changes a lot about how Pyro is played, so I'll be going over the good and then the bad. For the good, firstly, I think of all the classes to give a jump to, Pyro makes the most sense. I mean, they've been trying to do it for years. If we look at Banny's official tier list of all the classes, there's a very obvious pattern when it comes to classes that are actually viable for competitive TF2. All the best classes have amazing mobility, or they're medic, and I think most people would really like to see more classes be competitively viable. I mean, you can't give Heavy a blast jump because he's balanced around having low mobility. You can't give Engineer a blast jump because that would be stupid. You can't give Sniper a blast jump because I don't like him. Also, a sniper who can relocate to the other side of the map in 10 seconds would be pure hell. And Spy. Actually, let's give Spy a blast jump. I think that'd be really funny. Pyro, however, I think makes perfect sense to give a blast jump to. He's already pretty close to being competitively viable, and I can't think of a major balancing reason why he can't have good mobility, especially considered its neutered mobility compared to classes like Soldier. So yeah, why shouldn't Pyro have a blast jump? You see, I have 3 wolves inside of me. The first wolf is a Pyro player who really likes Pyro and wants him to be better. The second wolf thinks blast jumps are sick and really fun. The third wolf, however, is this stupid dumb nerd that cares about game balance or whatever. And unfortunately, that wolf is telling me there are some problems with these changes. You see, every class in the game has a weakness. Pyro's weakness is that his primary weapon has very limited range.
No shit.
But if Pyro is able to blast jump towards an enemy, his range is essentially doubled. I did this technique a lot on the server, and well, let's just say, no one stayed scout for very long. I don't believe giving Pyro better mobility is a problem, but I do think giving Pyro free mobility is a problem. Scout's mobility comes at the cost of having underwhelming stats in every other category. Demo and Soldier both have to expend ammo in their clip, as well as do self-damage to achieve their mobility. In this mod, currently, Pyro only has to spend the cost of 1 air blast to jump. It's clear that jumping needs to cost a little bit more. Now, I don't want that cost to be doing self-damage, because, well...
How original.
TF2 has very distinct class separation, and I fear giving 3 different classes the ability to do jumps that all have the same downside would just make them too similar. But as Neelix from Star Trek Voyager once said, when the road before you splits in 2, take the 3rd path. I think the best way to balance this is to make Pyros choose between mobility versus offense. Here's how I envision this working. In order to do one of these jumps, you have to charge a super air blast. Now, charging this doesn't take long, like 1.5 seconds. Using this super air blast, you'd be able to air blast jump. However, using a super air blast will always cause your flamethrower to overcharge, making it so you can't use its primary fire for 5 seconds. This, I believe, would give Pyro good enough mobility to keep up with the other viable classes while not completely negating his one weakness. The only other thing I would change other than that is probably make this air blast jump more viable to do in the air, because again, I feel like it's important to make sure this mechanic's unique and not just a retread of the existing jump mechanics. But seriously, if you ever play this mod, I would really recommend playing Pyro and using air blast jumps. They're just so fun to do. Even if you don't abuse them to jump into enemies to do more damage, they're just so useful. Seriously, the map just opens up. It's almost like you're one of the classes map designers cared about when they were designing the map. The last base class change we have is this. Basically what this means is that if you spam air blast, players will be knocked around less after the first air blast.
Okay.
I did not notice this change at all, if I'm being honest. But then again, I don't think I really spam air blasts to knock people around, so if it makes annoying players worse, then it's a good change, I guess. Now, on to our first weapon change review. After 8 minutes, Backwinder's change is very simple. You get 33% more push force when using its air blast on yourself. Basically, while you have less ammo to use air blast jumps, your air blast jumps push you farther. The Backburner has always been a really fun weapon to use with mobility tools, so I think this overall was a really good change. If air blast jumps ever did get added to base TF2, which yeah, I know they won't. I'm not delusional, I know they won't. But if they ever did get added, this is exactly the way I'd want the Backburner to be rebalanced. Alright, the next weapon changes are the degreasers. The only change to this weapon is it removed the experimental ability to have flames linger on surfaces. And wow, fish on a stick, let me tell you, this weapon, it's terrible now. It's basically useless compared to the other flamethrowers now. However, you could potentially fix it by, I don't know, giving us the old degreaser. Okay, I was joking. But in all seriousness, the biggest issue with the degreaser right now is it's basically the stock flamethrower. It's almost the exact same weapon. It has some of the most minor upsides and some of the most minor downsides imaginable. So it's just, It's so boring. I mean, combo pyros aren't even using this weapon anymore. That's how indistinguishable it is from stock. And there are certain weapons in this mod that have been changed, not because they're over or underpowered, but just because they're way too similar to stock. So I feel like, changing this would be a good thing to do. Potentially raising switch speed and lowering damage by 10% would be an easier change. But what I would personally do is I would actually lower the duration of afterburn on the degreaser to only about 2 seconds or so. That way it's actually harder to combo with it, but it's more rewarding if you get good at it. The next changes we have are to the worst flamethrower in the game. I've always really hated using the Flog, and it's not because I personally think I'm above using cheap tactics. I don't. I just think that currently the Flog necessitates a really boring playstyle, mostly due to it almost entirely lacking any sort of skill expression. I mean, seriously, an amoeba could use the Flog. The only reason I ever like the Flog is because of its passive ability to make Pyro no longer invisible to medics. Fish on a Stick fixes this weapon immensely in 2 different ways. Firstly, rather than not having any air blast, it has a sort of neutered air blast. Instead of reflecting projectiles, it just deletes them. It also doesn't knock back any enemies. This means that the weapon still has a major downside, but it still takes skill to use. It also allows the Flog Pyro to break out of its overly defensive shell by maintaining some of the survivability of the stock flamethrower. The other major thing that's been changed about the Flog is the fact you have to build up your crits now. This works by utilizing the previously mentioned mechanic that allows Pyro to build up damage by consistent fire particle placement. This both works to steadily nerf the weapon as well as required Pyros to be more skillful while using it. You can no longer successfully operate the Flog with an amoeba level of intelligence. Now you need at least a fish level. So far, I really like all the Pyro changes this mod has made, but this is where I'm gonna have to stop the video. As I said earlier, Pyro probably has the most changes out of any other class, so I'll continue doing this in part 2.